interest and can further research and develop their own ideas around those topics. This is part 2 of this series. I have already done a few, so if I come across any that I've already done, I will skip over those as a warning. That's why I may skip some if I've already done them. So, philosophy is one of my interests. I enjoy reading it, but when I read it, it is in my head. Hence, I don't really know how to pronounce some of these words, especially some of the Greek philosophers' names, or just some have really hard names, and I don't, when I read it in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll look that word up, I know what that means, or something like that, but reading it out loud, I don't know how my pronunciation will be, so that'll be something a little bit fun. So it's just some short philosophy. The 50 most thought-provoking philosophies, each explained in half a minute. It is more than half a minute, trust me. Okay. Why is it? I don't. I'm not. Okay, that's got a bookmark in it, to be fair. This one's a bit confusing, but we can do this one. Frasia's puzzle. Okay. Let's see if I can do this. In his early writings on language, the great logician Gottlob Frege held that the meaning of a name is its reference. For example, the meaning of the name Mont Blanc is the mountain itself. But in later writings, Frege argued that two names may have the same reference yet different meaning. He reasoned that if the meaning of a name is just its reference, and two names have the same reference, then it should make no difference to the meaning of a sentence which name occurs in it, since Hesperus and Phosphorus are both names of the planet Venus. 1. Hesperus is Phosphorus, and 2. Hesperus is Hesperus should have the same meaning, but Frege observed that they're two different meanings, since 1. The Hesperus is Phosphorus expressed a significant astronomical discovery, which 2. Hesperus is trivial. The explanation of why the different meaning is Frege's puzzle. Frege's solution is that the meaning of a name is not only its reference, but also its sense. The sense of a name is a condition that picks out the individual, if there is a one, that satisfies that condition as the name's reference. Frege says that Hesperus and Phosphorus have different senses that pick out the same reference. This, he says, explains how 1. Hesperus is Phosphorus can be informative when 2. Hesperus is trivial, which 20th century philosophy of language involves a discussion of Frege's notion of sense. So, that is from reading out that main paragraph. Now they're a little bit long here. A 3-second thrash, like a quick little bit of information. If Hesperus and Phosphorus are just different names for the same thing, the planet Venus, how can it be that Hesperus is Phosphorus and Hesperus is Hesperus differ in meaning? The 3-minute thought. Many philosophers find the notion of sense obscure. The logician Sal Cripp argued that proper names do not have senses at all. In his view, the reference of a proper name is not determined by a sense, but by a chain of uses of the name that begins with an act of naming. For example, you may use Socratic philosopher, even though you don't know anything about him, as long as you acquire the name for someone who used it to reference Thales. And then a joke is, you say phosphorus, I say Hesperus. Let's call the whole thing off and just call it Venus. Okay. Okay, these are all little profiles of people. Okay. You may have heard of, if you've done like maybe global studies, you may have heard of Marxism. It's like, I think it's a form of communism. Anyway, politics, all in politics. Okay, so Marx's historical materialism. The foundational premise of Karl Marx's historical materialism is that the form that society takes is determined by the way in which production is organized. This has meant a fundamental division between those who own factories and control the means of production, like factories, machinery, tools, and the like, and those who do not. Marx claimed that the conflict between the haves and the have-nots have been the motor of history. The most advanced mode of organizing production is capitalism. It is characterized by the existence of two great classes. That's a hard word. The bourgeois, the owners of the means of production, and the proletariats, who own only their own labor power. The proletariats are forced to sell their labor to the bourgeois in order to survive. They expand their productive energy for the benefit of the class that exploits them. This dynamic renders capitalism unstable. The proletariat, aware of the reality of its situation, can rise up and overthrow the existing system. Marx argued that it is inevitable that capitalism will eventually collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. The historical destiny of the proletariat is to institute a new form of society, being communism. Based on collective ownership, in doing so, they will end the alienation of the proletariat from the labor process itself and from their essential humanity. Okay. It's a bit political, politics are a bit subjective. Okay, 3-second thrash. The history of society is the story of conflict between great opposing social forces or classes, which will only cease when the workers of the world rise up, throw off their chains, and abolish the capitalist system. 3-minute thought. The Marxist idea that capitalism will be replaced by a society free of systematic inequality and conflict is not very plausible in light of the events of recent history. Not only is capitalism still going strong, but the socialist experiments of the 20th century all ended in failure. Okay. Moreover, Hitler's concentration camps and Stalin's gulags make it hard to believe that human beings will become rational and self-aware because the productive forces of society are collectively owned. So Marxism is a form of communism. So according to Marx, the bourgeois will continue to raise their classes to the hard-working proletariat until the revolution comes. So politics. We've done that one. We've done that one. Okay. I don't think we've done this one. Descartes' mind-body problem. In his meditations, René Descartes formulated the mind-body problem. The problem is understanding how consciousness, mind, thought, and free choice are related to the material world described by science. Descartes argued that mind and body are distinct substances with essential features. Mind, he said, is essentially thinking, not spatial, and can initiate free choice. Body is essentially extended in space, non-thinking, and governed by the laws of motion. Descartes' own view, dualist interactionism, is that in a living person, mind and body are united, and each is constantly influencing the other. But how can mind affect body if the latter is governed by the laws of nature? Descartes' answer was that mind and body interact in a human being at a point inside the pineal gland. So that's a small gland located at the base of the brain. This answer didn't satisfy the subsequent philosophers who have come up with many alternative theories. Among these are philosophism, the view that mind and body are not really distinct and that mind is really physical. Idealism, which holds that body is really an illusion and only mind exists. Monism, which says that reality has both mental and physical aspects. And, oh my gosh, epianomism, the view that body can affect mind, but mind cannot affect the body. Okay, 3-second thrash. Is your mind a non-physical, ghostly kind of thing that controls your body? Is it your brain, or is it something else entirely? It's a good question for you. 3-minute thought. Descartes thought that the laws of physics leave room for minds to affect the motions of the pineal gland and the body. But as physics has advanced, many philosophers have become convinced that all motions of the physical bodies are governed by the laws of physics. This makes it especially difficult to understand how the mind can affect the body unless it is itself physical. And then the little joke thingy on the side. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer called the mind-body problem the world knot, and it's yet to be untied. Can you untie it? Okay. We can do one on religion. Okay, I can turn this around. I haven't actually heard about this one before. Okay. Anselm's ontological argument. Anselm of Canterbury, I don't know, a later saint Anselm, believed that by using reason alone it is possible to show that God exists, that the human soul is immortal, and that Scripture is without error. Most of the arguments he employed to this end no longer hold any interest. However, his ontological proof of God remains a live issue in modern philosophy. It runs like this. 1. God is defined, that then which nothing greater can be conceived. 2. It is possible for things that exist in the mind, for example the idea of God, also to exist in reality. There are then 2 possibilities here. God exists only in the mind, or God exists in the mind and in reality. 3. If something exists in the mind and in reality, it is greater than anything that exists solely in the mind. 4. We have defined God as that then which nothing greater can be conceived. However, if God exists only in the mind, we can conceive of something greater, namely a God which exists in the mind and reality. Therefore, God cannot exist just in the mind. 5. Hey presto, it follows that God exists both in the mind and in reality. 3-second thrash. If God existed only in the mind, he wouldn't be much of a God. Since a God who isn't much of a God isn't a God, he must exist in reality as well. 3-minute thought. Anselm's ontological proof has provoked a massive literature. This is not that a similar argument could be employed for any entity. You can conceive of a perfect chair. A perfect chair must be more perfect in reality than in the mind. Therefore, a perfect chair exists. Probably, though, it won't be on sale at IKEA. The joke. If God didn't exist, we'd have to invent him, and as soon as we do, we'd bring God into existence. Very nice. Let's do another one of God. Pascal's Rager. Before he became a devout Christian, the 17th century mathematician Blaise Pascal was a gambler. He was the founder of the probability theory and worked out a way for determining the monetary value of a gamble based on probabilities. Pascal claimed that deciding whether to believe in God is like a gamble. It is a bet on the proposition that God exists. If God exists, then the consequence of believing in him is eternal bliss, while hell awaits atheists and agnostics. On the other hand, if God doesn't exist, then the consequence of believing in him is at worst living a religiously correct life, while the consequence of not believing him is continuing one life as is. Pascal observed that the consequences of not believing in God, if he does exist, are so awful, and the consequences of believing in him, if he does exist, so good that even if one thought that the probability of God existing was very small, it would still be better to bet that he does exist. Three-second thrash. Pascal claimed he proved that the gamble of believing in God is worth a hell of a lot more than the gamble of remaining an agnostic or an atheist. 3-minute thought. A difficulty with Pascal's argument is that it isn't so easy simply to decide what to believe, and in particular to believe in God if one actually thinks that it is very unlikely that God exists. And even if one could do that, it is not obvious that God, at least the Christian God, would be inclined to reward a person who came to believe on him basis of placing a bet. Yeah, that's true. God doesn't play dice, and he probably wouldn't be impressed if you gambled on whether or not to believe in him. That's, yeah. That's very confusing, I think. That might be a bit hard. We could do Aristotle's Ethics. Aristotle's first rule for being good is that there are no rules. Being good is about developing your character so that you are disposed to do the best thing in each situation. It is not about internalizing some moral manual. Human beings are creatures of habit, and just as a good musician becomes so by practicing, so by doing virtuous things we become virtuous people. But what is a virtue? It is living according to our natures as rational animals. A good dog does doggy things well, and a good person does human things well, especially thinking, because this is the one thing we can do that no other living thing can. We can be guided towards right action by surrendering the idea that good and bad are opposites, and instead thinking of the good as lying on a mean between the extremes of excess and deficiency. For instance, courage lies between the excess of rashness and the deficiency of cowardice, generosity between meanness and profligacy, kindness between the excess of disregard for others and the deficiency of indulge. Contrary to how morality is often conceived, Aristotle's ethics are about more than being good. They're a blueprint for living well. 3-second thrash. There is no dark and bright side to the force, but rather two dark ends and a light middle. I like that, actually. A 3-minute thought. Aristotle's approach to ethics has been reviewed in recent decades under the name of virtue ethics. One challenge it faces over the central importance of character. The worry is that the idea is circular. We know what the right thing to do because that is what a person of good character would do, but how do you know whether a person has good moral character because of what they do? Doing the right thing is not just about following rules, but striking the correct balance, according to the circumstances in which you find yourself, both good and bad. Oh, I like this one. Goodman's gruesome riddle. Nelson Goodman claimed that the inductive rule, infer that past regularities will be continued in the future, cannot be right since it leads to conflicting conclusions. To illustrate this, he defined a predicate is grue, G-R-U-E, as follows. Something is grue, G-R-U-E, at time t, if, and only if, it is green and t is before the first moment of the year 2100, or it is blue and t is that moment or later. Suppose all emeralds so far observe the green, then they also grew because they are green and have been observed before 2100. So the rule of indiction. There's a better explanation of this later on. So the rule of indiction must be modified to say that the future will be like the past, but only in certain respects that are projectable. The problem is specifying which predicates are projectable and which aren't. One idea is that grue, G-R-U-E, is not projectable since it is defined in terms of green and blue, but green and blue are just easily definable in terms of grue and bleen. The rule infer the past regularities will be continued in the future must be modified to apply only to projectable predicates. 3-minute thought. Prior to Goodman propounding this riddle, Bertrand Russell had already remarked that reasoning that the future will be like the past. Prior to Goodman's propounding his riddle, Bertrand Russell had already remarked that reasoning that the future will be like the past can lead one astray. He imagined a chicken. This is the good example. So he imagined a chicken who observed the farmer having always in the past selected a chicken other than herself for his dinner. Thus the chicken concluded that in the future the farmer would always select a chicken other than herself for his dinner. On the 25th night of the month, the rooster realized that the induction had been wrong all along. He turned grue with fright. Hence the chicken died. Oh, okay. This would have to be one of my favorites all time. The name's really hard to pronounce though. I don't think I spelled It gets you thinking. Okay. Epidals heap. Weighing in at 100 kilos, 220 pounds. Harry is a fat man. He won't stop being fat if his weight drops to 99.999 kilos, which is 220.4 pounds. So that means any man who weighs the same as Harry must also be fat. A fraction of a gram or an ounce can never make the difference between being fat or thin. But if that's true, then someone who weighs 99.998 kilos, 220.457 pounds is also fat. And so someone who weighs 99.997 kilos, 220.455 pounds, and so on, pounds to the one who weighs 39.999 kilos, 88.182 pounds. But this is absurd. Someone who weighs 40 kilos, 88.184 pounds, could never be described as fat. Hence the paradox, a series of apparently logically watertight steps, leads us to a conclusion that is manifestly false. But neither the logic nor the observation have any evident flaws. This is a version of Epilog's paradox of the heap, where a similar argument showed that a heap would still be a heap when it contained only 1 grain of sand, just as long as the grains were removed one by one. I love this theory. 3-second thrash. Why you can never make a mountain out of a molehill. 3-minute thought. What might this paradox show? That concepts such as fat and thin are vague, so it is a mistake to ever treat them as though they were factual questions to which they definitely apply. Or is it that counterintuitively there is a firm boundary between fat and thin, a heap and a small pile, and that if you step across it by 1 grain or 1 gram, the correct description changes? The joke. The journey from being a thin man to being a fat man and back again begins with a single gram. Keep opening to that one. I've done that one. That one's very confusing. Oh, this could be good. Berkeley's idealism. Maybe we all accept that our senses provide us with a mental picture of the world, but not everyone understands what this implies. It means that we are only indirectly aware of the world via inner mental representations of it. If you are a skeptical sort, you might wonder how we know that our mental images really represent stuff out there. George Beckley's astonishing answer to the skeptical worry was idealism, denying the existence of everything other than minds and the ideas within them. There is no room for skepticism about the external world, because there is no external world, no matter underpinning our experience. There are still things in a sense, but we group our regularly occurring sensory experiences together and give them names. Apple is our word for a consistent collection of sweet, red, crunchy sensations. That's all an apple is. For Berkeley, to suppose that it is something more, something out there, is to go beyond the evidence of experience. Worse, it is to think the absurd thought that sweetness can exist untasted, that red can exist unseen. If you disagree, bear in mind that you are the one claiming something more and more material, substratum, in addition to evidence of our senses. The burden of proof, Berkeley might say, rests with you. 3-second thrash. According to Berkeley, it's all in your head. 3-minute thought. If this apple can only exist in the mind that perceives it, does it just wink out of existence whenever I close my eyes? Berkeley argues that God perceives and therefore sustains the whole of the universe, whether we happen to be looking at it or not. Many take the answer to be merely ad hoc, but for Berkeley, the continued experience of everything is proof not only of God's existence, but also of his benevolence. Without the means to perceive the universe, would any of it exist? Okay.